taking over a month to make the first piece of clothing in my capsule wardrobe, I'm already behind on the second piece. So I've been trying to think about what I can do to improve my time management, and I thought, what if I take the pattern from the first skirt in my capsule wardrobe and use it to make the second skirt in my capsule wardrobe. And I'm planning to take the top half of the pattern I drafted for my maxi skirt, crop it at the hip, and then add a ruffle or a pleat leaning towards pleats along the hip line down to about the knee. And even though these two patterns on paper look nothing alike, I think I can reuse my maxi skirt pattern for this cupcake skirt pattern. And that will save me time drafting patterns. The first step in altering my maxi skirt pattern is to pin it back onto my dress form and mark out a new hemline right at the hips. And I am preserving the length of the original hemline by just folding up the new one rather than cutting it off. And I am not making any other alterations to this pattern for my green skirt at this step, even though I plan to add buttons onto the side of my green skirt rather than just a zipper on my maxi skirt, which essentially requires a different amount of fabric. But if you remember from my last video, my maxi skirt ended up a little bit too wide at the waist due to some alterations I made. So I'm hoping using the pattern as it is will give me enough room for a button placket later. I still have a lot of gunk in my throat, and it's still a little bit hard to talk for extended periods of time after being sick while I was making the maxi skirt, and it's just really been a drain on me. And I've still been pretty tired. That's why it's taken so long to get back into my sewing room after being sick, and it's just really, it's been difficult, and I'm just really tired of it, and I want to feel better, and I want to make stuff, and I don't want to be taking so long to make it because I still feel like crap. I've shown you guys this fabric before. This is a nice sturdy cotton fabric that I got from the thrift store a few years ago for like $2 or $4. I know it was really cheap. It was such a good deal to get like 2 yards of this fabric out of it. And I think since this is a nice sturdy cotton fabric, it will pleat really well. So that's why I'm leaning towards making pleats on this skirt rather than just a ruffle. And I'm really excited to see how this turns out, but I gotta iron it first. So let's go iron it. Using my green fabric, I cut out a front panel for my skirt as well as a back panel and 2 side panels that will work for a button placket later. I am also using a waistband facing on this skirt rather than a full-on waistband. And since my interfacing doesn't like to iron in well, I am reinforcing it with some really solid stitching before I sew everything together. Just like with my maxi skirt and mock-up, I pinned all of my darts and side seam together. I sewed them shut with my domestic machine, then I traded in my serger and serged all the edges. And I tied and tucked in my serger ends using a crochet hook. And of course I pressed everything flat. I lined up the waistband facing and button placket pieces and serged all of those together in one shot. And of course, I pressed everything flat. Come here. Dude. Cujo, I am gonna do something to you. Baby. Come here. Oh, buddy. You are terrible. Be gone, foul beast. What? He's being terrible.
It's like, yeah, I got kicked out. What of it?
Oh, fuck. Well, I think that actually fits better than my maxi skirt does. I have about an inch to work with the button placket here, and the length is perfect. It comes to the fullness of my hips, which is exactly where I want that pleating to start, and I'm happy with it. This is exactly what I wanted the top of the skirt to look like. So now it's time to do some buttons. I laid out a few different button options that I liked, and I narrowed it down to 2. And this is a really hard decision to make because I really love the way both of these look with the skirt. I think these darker buttons look really sleek with the skirt, like they have a nice low profile, and I think the coloring works really well with the skirt. Whereas these bigger buttons just pop, and they really have that nice I'm a cool button, look at me thing going on, which is why I bought these buttons in the first place. I'm really torn also because I would have exactly the right number of these big buttons for this skirt, which is the perfect amount, whereas these darker buttons, I would only be using half of them. So I could use the other half elsewhere in my capsule wardrobe, or I could save these buttons for like a jacket or a dress where I want to use all of the buttons for it. So I'm also really torn on that. So I really can't decide, and I need to. And I don't know, maybe I'll go eat dinner and then come back and decide then. I don't know. But I need to decide. I need to pick my buttons out. So, good job. Come on. Come in here. I can't have you outside the door screaming at me. You gonna pick a button, Cujo? You gonna pick a button? Okay, this has been quite the dilemma to pick from. So I took a few days to think about it. I asked my cat which one he liked better. I asked my husband which one he liked better. And I even went through all my vintage buttons to see if I could find anything I liked better for this skirt. And although I did find a really cool vintage Hessian mercenary button, I didn't find anything in my vintage button stash that I wanted to use for this skirt. So, do you have to? Must you? Must you make noise? Must you bang on the door? This is the 3rd time I've tried to do this line and you keep pounding and meowing. Alright, if I let you out, you're not coming back in. Go. Shoo. So the decision has been made. I am going to put the big silver buttons on this skirt. I ultimately decided to use 5 buttons instead of 6 because the spacing worked a little bit better on my skirt. I marked out the spacing for my buttonholes using pins and then marked them with a single line of basting stitches. Then I copied that same spacing on the other side of my skirt for the buttons themselves. And I gathered some fabric scraps to make a test buttonhole. And I am testing out a few different sized buttons to make these buttonholes because I don't like the way my buttonholer works. And once I figure out which buttonhole size works the best, that's the button I use to make all the buttonholes on my garment. So once I picked an appropriate sized button for my buttonhole, I sewed on 5 buttonholes on my skirt. I used a needle to draw my threads to the inside of my skirt, tied them off, and threaded them through the loops of my buttonhole. I have found using a stitch ripper to rip open buttonholes, but with a pin at the end to stop it works pretty well. But you can also use a very sharp pair of scissors. And since I was dealing with shank buttons here, I had to hand sew all of them onto my skirt. And isn't that a perfect button placket? I also took this time to tack down the waistband facing of my skirt to the inside seams of my darts and side seam. This will help the waistband facing sit a little bit nicer and prevent it from buckling while I wear it. That came out so good, and it actually sits at my natural waistband unlike my maxi skirt, so I don't need to alter this one. But at this point, if you're making a similar skirt and you realize that it's just too big and you need to alter it, make it a little bit tighter, I'll show you how to do that now. When altering the waistband on a skirt, I like to put it on inside out. Then I can easily pinch a new dart into the waistband, sometimes on the front, back, or side, wherever I feel like it fits the best. And I secure my new seam by running 2 pins opposite to each other. And 1 or 2 simple seams makes it fit so much better. I think anywhere between 10 to 12 inches for the pleating will look nice. So I'm gonna go take a look at my fabric and see how much I have to work with. So I squared up the rest of my green fabric and cut it into 12-inch wide strips. I pinned all of these strips of fabric together to make an even longer strip of fabric and serged them together. I also serged all the way around it to finish the raw edges. I ironed up the hem and smoothed out the wrinkles. Then I secured the hem with a straight stitch. Now, prepping this fabric for the pleats was not very difficult, but it was very time consuming because I was dealing with about 7 yards of fabric here. And then I realized I didn't actually measure the hem of my skirt to see if this 7 yards of fabric is enough fabric for the pleat, because you need 3 times as much fabric for a pleat as you do the finished length. Combining the front and back of my hem, I need about 2 yards of fabric, finished pleated fabric all the way around the hem of my skirt. A little less than 2 yards actually. So if you multiply 2 times 3, I really only need about 6 yards of fabric. So the 7 yards I have here is a little overkill. So I very tediously found the center of my fabric strip and marked it with a few pins. Pleats are fairly simple to make. You're just gonna take the width of your fabric, fold it over, and press the crap out of it to get it to lay flat. And I have to admit that making pleats is definitely not something I enjoy doing, but I think it was really worth it for this project. And even though it took a long time to pleat all 7 yards of this fabric, I managed to do it. And if you do have the time and space, laying all of your pleated fabric out on the floor underneath some books overnight will really help your pleats retain a nice crisp edge. You know, I'm not doing too bad with time management on this skirt. I've actually got a lot done. I was able to do a lot this weekend and a lot more today. I wasn't even expecting to be able to work on this pleat at all today because last night we had a tree fall down in a storm and it fell across the street and it was blocking traffic. So we had to get that taken care of, and fortunately we have the most wonderful neighbors out here, and they came over with a tractor and with chainsaws and they just hacked that tree up and drug it off, and all they wanted was to be able to use that tree as firewood to heat their homes. So I was able to actually get in here and sew today and get this pleat pleated out, and now all I have to do is let it sit for a few days while I'm at work, and then when I come back I can just sew this pleat onto my skirt. Let's rip the band-aid off and finish sewing this skirt. So I removed all the books from my pleated fabric and used a needle and a thread to hand baste all of my pleats together so they would not shift while sewing them on my sewing machine. I overlapped the top edge of the pleat with the bottom edge of the skirt, right sides together. And I used a bunch of pins to pin the pleat to the skirt. And I centered my box pleat on the side seam of my skirt so my pleats would fan out from the side seam. And then I took it over to my sewing machine and stitched my pleats to my skirt using a nice long straight stitch. And this last part was a little bit tricky. I trimmed up the edges of my pleats and then pinned them together, wrong sides together. I stuck a few pins in it and stitched it down. Then I turned the seam inside out, finger pressed it down, put a few more pins in it, and stitched that down with the fabric right sides together. This created a French seam, which will allow my skirt hem to look a little bit nicer and finish the edge. Then I pulled out all of my yellow basting stitches and pressed my skirt one last time to ensure the pleated seam laid flat at the bottom of my skirt. This skirt is so cute and comfy and I absolutely love it already. I'm gonna get so much wear out of this skirt in my capsule wardrobe. I love that it goes with so many different shirt combinations, and I'm really excited that I made this earlier on in my capsule wardrobe journey because that means I'm gonna get to wear it with everything else I make later. And these buttons are just the cutest. I am so glad I went with these big silver buttons on this skirt because I think they really give it a fun, bold look, and it's just so cute on this skirt. I think it really adds a nice detail. So if you guys aren't already subscribed to my channel, make sure you are so you can come watch me sew the rest of the clothing for my capsule wardrobe and make some extra cute stuff to go with this skirt. And if you guys liked watching this video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like on this video or a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching my video today. I will see you guys all next time.